Hello, everybody, and it's a pleasure to welcome you in another webinar or podcast that aims to answer a question that comes up very frequently when we discuss the venous sinus stenting procedure with patients. I wait for our patients, the roundtable participants, to open up their cameras. We have Cali Halperin, Elizabeth Verostek, and Allyson Tlacoxolal, which are patients that I treated many years ago. And I think they are the best people to tell us how their life has been affected by having the venous sinus stenting procedure, and how is life after stenting, which is a question that comes very often. Next to me is Kelly Hannsgen, nurse practitioner that has been working with me for many, many years. And I thank her for all her help and support every day. And I want to make sure that Allyson is also with us. Yes, she is. Very nice. And I will start by saying that some housekeeping rules. One is that this is going to be recorded, so we will post it on YouTube channel, in a few days. There is a chat option for patients to ask questions, which is you're available to use at any time. Kelly will be going through the chat box and interrupt us as appropriately. And also, I will ask everybody other than the participants to make sure that the microphone is mute. I think before we start, what I'd like to say is that personally, but also I think many patients owe a big thank you to patients like Allyson, Elizabeth, and Cali, who very early on trusted us to proceed with this procedure when it was new. There was not a lot of high quality data out there, and it was a leap of faith and not an easy one. But because of their trust and their determination to proceed with the procedure that was promising at the time, we've been able to show that this is a good procedure, that in the right patient, this can help significantly. And this way we're able to help many, many patients today. So big thank you from other patients and from me personally. I think that a good way to start this roundtable discussion is a few minutes introduction from each patient that will include, who they are, their symptoms at the time of diagnosis, and how they proceeded into reaching the point to have the venous sinus stenting procedure. And then we can follow up with details about the procedure, their feelings, their recovery, and their life after that. So let's, maybe with no particular order, maybe Allyson can go first.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here. I am super excited to be back and talking about a topic that really saved my life. So my name is Allyson Tlacoxolal. I think it's an honor to be patient number 10. I was patient number 10, and that's my claim to fame. And I also am coming up in December on my 10-year anniversary. So we have to update my photos, Dr. Patsalides, because they're definitely, I need a new one.
You still look very young. I don't, but you.
There you go. Well, yeah, you look the same too. So I actually, my story was, I was in my early 30s. I was actually pregnant when I was diagnosed, my first baby. I was pregnant when I was diagnosed with pseudotumor cerebri. But I had suffered for years since in my early 20s with debilitating headaches, migraines I was diagnosed with. But unfortunately, as time moved on, I started to get worsening symptoms where I was losing my vision. And that was definitely the scariest part of all of it was as time went on, when I was pregnant, I would actually have these episodes where I would literally have no vision for a few seconds throughout the day. I was still working, but like I shouldn't have probably been driving, but I didn't know what was happening. I thought it was just migraines. And, you know, that causes impact in your vision. But then I also had, ironically, like a baby sounded like almost an ultrasound heartbeat in my head that I literally thought was like, am I hearing my baby's heart? I didn't really understand what was happening. So over the course of time of the symptoms getting worse and me going to every doctor and being told that my ears were just dirty and things like that, I finally went to an ophthalmologist who saw the swelling of my optic nerve and had referred me back to Will's Eye Hospital. And I was pregnant at the time, and that's when I was diagnosed with pseudotumor cerebri. It was scary. I don't know how you want me to continue on to how we met right now, or should we hold off?
You can continue up to the point of the procedure and then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I had to have my baby 5 weeks early because the doctors thought I was going blind at the time. And I didn't know what life would be like after, you know, having a baby. She was premature. She's great now. She's 14 in high school. But yeah, so as soon as I gave birth, I started to kind of try to figure out how to treat pseudotumor cerebri. So I went to my local ER one night because my vision was just getting progressively worse. And they had told me that they wanted to do a shunt. And my local hospital is definitely not like hospitals in New York City. So my parents and my husband made the decision to not do brain surgery at our local ER, but somebody had known of a doctor in New York. His name was Dr. Schwartz at the time. Oh, well, I'm sure that's still his name. And I got in an ambulance one night and I went to New York to meet Dr. Schwartz, who was going to put a shunt in my brain right before Christmas. And I was scared to death. It sounds vain, but like I didn't want to shave my head. I was early 30s. I was like, I don't want to do this, but it was the only way to save my vision. And literally the morning I was going in for surgery, I remembered I had these like things on my head marked up, ready to go. And the Dr. Schwartz had said, great news. Like, I think that you have a narrowing of your vein. And I was like, what does that even mean? That sounds terrible. But they wanted to introduce me to Dr. Patsalides to talk about a clinical trial that they were doing. And I was like, will I be home in time for Christmas? I think that was my first question. Will I be home in time for Christmas? Because I had a little baby. And will he have to shave my head? And they said, no. And I was like, where is this man? I will meet him then. So that day I met Dr. Patsalides. And then within 24 to 48 hour-ish, I was in for the procedure. I remember signing, I think it was like over 70 pages of paperwork at the time. And you guys were super patient. My whole family was there because that was the day I was supposed to have the shunt surgery. But you were so patient and answered so many. It almost felt like thousands of questions that we all had. And then, yeah, we signed the paperwork. I signed the paperwork. And within 48 hours, I was in having my stent put in. And obviously I'm doing well. It changed my life, saved my life. And that's what I'm here to talk about. So.
Very good. No, I remember this very well. This conversation we had in the hospital very well.
Yes.
Hold on for a second. I think we have some power plug-in problems here. Now it's okay. Chris, if you can hear us, maybe come over, please. Elizabeth, what is your story?
I think when you hear the phrase "saved my life," that's going to be the thing that resonates the most with me, because literally this saved my life. I was diagnosed with all sorts of different things starting in 2007, ranging from just simple headaches to cluster headaches, migraines, you name it. I had a diagnosis. I was treated with physical therapy and any number of medications, some of which made me feel worse than better. And I remember before the stenting treatment, I can't tell you how many things I missed because I just felt miserable. Headaches and vision impairments were more normal for me than actually having a week that was a week that I could live through. So and it's funny because when I talked to my husband, he was like, do you remember our honeymoon? I was like, not really. He was like, I do. That was the week that you spent mostly in bed. Like, okay, great. No wonder I don't really remember it. And the year that I finally got a proper treatment was one where we were starting to think about having kids. And so I got off a ton of different medicines, and all of my symptoms got much worse than they had been prior to that. And so when it came to all of my headache symptoms and my vision symptoms, they were progressively worse. And then in the fall of 2014, it got to the point where vision symptoms for me, instead of just being a mild episode of vision loss or darkening in one eye, it became to the point where I just completely lost vision in one eye. And that was terrifying. I literally couldn't see out of my left eye. And I remember, very similar to what Allyson was describing, this sound of, I couldn't tell what exactly it was. It sounded like a ceiling fan, like a broken ceiling fan was whooshing everywhere. And I remember just stopping people and asking them, can you hear this? Is this something that's just in my head? Or is this something that you hear too? I remember also going back and forth to the ER. In 2014, we spent Thanksgiving in the hospital. And I'll tell you, that's not the best way to spend Thanksgiving. They don't have that great of a turkey dinner. So if that's what you're looking for, I don't recommend that in a hospital. And then finally, it was like fate was looking out for me. One of the times that we went to the ER, one of the fellows that was there looked into my eyes, and it was Dr. Dara Beer. She was a fellow working for Mark Dinkin, your colleague. And she said, has anyone mentioned to you that a possible thing that you have isn't just a migraine issue, but potentially IIH? Like, what are you talking about? And when I went back to my neurologist, she had said, oh, yeah, that's in the possible list of things, but that's pretty rare. So I didn't put that towards the top. Fast forward a few weeks, and sure enough, I was meeting with you and Dr. Dinkin, and the array of different options I had for surgery, shunt, the microsheath defenestration, and this. I'm like, I can always go to those other two if this doesn't work out, but gosh, this definitely, the stent surgery, why wouldn't I try that? Why wouldn't I do something that seems like the best possible option? And I remember waking up from surgery, and that horrible whooshing sound immediately was gone. I could hear for the first time in months without feeling like I was deafened by that whooshing sound. It was amazing. And since then, I can see. It took about a month for my vision to return. And there's still a little bit of damage, but to be able to see out of both eyes and to be able to function like a normal human being is by far the best thing. So again, saved my life. It's profound.
Thank you. You're very kind, and thanks for the sharing your story. And I think both you and Allyson were part of the clinical trial we had at the time with my excellent colleague Mark Dinkin, neuro-ophthalmologist, that him and I basically paved the way of clinical trials on this condition. And you both were enrolled in the first trial of looking into venous stenting for IIH in the United States, which was 2012, 13, 14, which was around the time you were treated. I think I want to discuss a little more about the procedure later on. So I will ask Cali to share her story, and I will say again that when I met Cali, she was a high school student, terrified, upset with everything that was going on, and it was unusual for us to consider treating what we call a pediatric patient at the time, even though 15 or 16 are not necessarily kids these days, but still qualifies as a pediatric patient. So Cali, please share your story with us.
My name is Cali. I was 16 when I started having symptoms of pseudotumor cerebri. I remember one day I just kind of woke up with a headache and thought it was normal. And then I went to sleep and I still had that headache, and I woke up the next day and I had that headache, and it went on for months. And it got to the point where I thought it was, literally in my head. I looked up like psychologists and psychiatrists, and I thought like I had made it up. I remember distinctly one night laying awake trying to convince myself that this was the baseline that every single person on earth felt. Everyone just had this, and that I was being like oversensitive, and that I'd made up that it was pain in the first place. Like I was trying to convince myself of anything, because when you're a teenager and you tell people that you have this weird headache, people very much brush it off. Doctors brush it off, and it's not easy to be heard. So when I was 17, I remember distinctly being in a neurologist's office, and that many neurologists refused to even see me. And my neurologist at the time said that headaches can be caused by thousands of reasons, and we can't just remove each one by one to figure out what this headache is. It's just not what we can do. And we begged for an MRI, and she said, take your time with the MRI. It's not an emergency. And then as soon as she got the MRI results back, she called my parents and had me rush to the ER, because she had a suspicion that it was pseudotumor cerebri. And I was diagnosed that day in the ER, and it stands to be one of the worst days I've lived. And I remember the next few weeks I had been very resigned. I no longer could picture myself and my life anymore. I had a twin brother, and we were looking at colleges, and all of a sudden my story and his story were going to diverge, and he was going to go to college, and I wasn't sure if I was going to make it to 19. And that's a really tough thing to come to terms with as a kid. And I was reading a lot of really horrible stories online on Facebook groups, and I had no business being in those Facebook groups. If you're in the Facebook groups, it's just not happy stories at all. It's just makes your future seem very bright and sad at times. But my parents pushed to go see a pediatric neurosurgeon, and all about neurosurgery and pseudotumor cerebri was the shunting procedure, and that sounded horrible. And I did not want to have revision surgeries. I also didn't want to shave my head. And it just seemed like signing up for a life of more pain. But after an hour and a half sitting in that pediatric neurosurgeon's office, he went through every single surgical option we had. And then he asked if we had a couple more minutes, if we would be willing to wait about an hour more. There was another doctor that I would be potentially qualified for a clinical trial if I waited it and stayed. And I won't even lie, the reason I stayed is because I didn't want to go to English class. That's the entire reason I said yes. I didn't want to go to English class, so I thought, why not? I'll wait. I'll see. I hope that my English teacher never sees this. But I didn't want to go, so I said yes. And Dr. Patsalides left a surgery as soon as he could, and he came to meet me, and he spent time explaining the trial. And I just thought to myself, I couldn't really picture my future anyway, and I certainly didn't want to picture a future where I was in so much pain from all of these incredibly invasive surgeries that, like, if it works, then I'll have borrowed time. I'll have a life that I never thought I would ever be able to live. And if it didn't, then at least I give it a shot. And it worked. I'm also proud of my patient number. I was patient number 69, which for a 17-year-old is the greatest gift someone could give you, is being patient number 69 in a clinical trial. So yeah, I was patient number 69. I went into the surgery. I think a lot of people are very scared of brain surgery and the word it was, but when I went into the surgery, I was more scared that something would happen and I wouldn't get the surgery than I was of the actual surgery itself. People often ask me how scared I was during the surgery, and the fear wasn't the actual surgery at all. It was that something would happen and I wouldn't get the surgery, that I would have to walk out of that hospital without a stent in my head. But I didn't. I have a stent in my head. And when I woke up from the surgery, it was the first time in about a year that I didn't have the pressure behind my eyes and that I didn't have that distinct pseudotumor cerebri pain. And it took a little while more to recover fully, but it was an unimaginable feeling to not be in excruciating pain.
Thank you. And I never realized that the reason you saw me was because you didn't want to go to class. Now you hear my feelings, but
in my defense, it worked out.
It did work out. And I'm sure your English teacher, if she saw this today, he or she would be happy.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, everyone's happy. My parents were going to let me leave the office anyway. You know them. They weren't going to let me walk out.
I think you kind of like started discussing the kind of like the second part here, which is the actual procedure, and your feelings about the procedure, which I think you described something that many patients share with us, that they're not so much afraid of what the procedure involves. They're more afraid of whether the procedure may not work or if they don't qualify for it. And I'm just going to spend a minute here. That is the way I typically do the procedure is I do the all parts together, and so there's the awake part that we do the measurements, what is called manometry and venogram, that we kind of like, to the best of our ability, try to confirm that the stent is a good treatment option, and then proceed to the under anesthesia. The second part, proceed with the actual stenting. So yes, there is a possibility that after we do the first part where the patient's awake, we do measurements of pressure and flow in the veins. I'll say that, look, I don't think this is going to help, and we should not do it. And I think that's in the back of the mind of patients sometimes. And so thanks for sharing that. I will start with you, since you started talking about the procedure. Do you remember the awake part? Was it nerve-wracking, difficult? Was it like worse or better than you expected?
I don't think I had any expectations going into it. I do remember the awake part very well, mostly because I think I was very fidgety, and you were like, "Please, we're operating." Stop fidgeting. I remember that.
A very frustrated teenager, I can tell you that.
But yeah, I remember that. I don't know how long it actually took, but it felt very quick, and it felt very painless. I remember basically it felt like just lying on the table and like someone was like patting my leg or something, and that was really it. But one thing that I think set the surgery apart from standard brain surgeries, not that I have that much experience in brain surgery, is that you were talking to me the whole time, and that helped me so much as a kid. Lying on a table, you feel pretty exposed, and it sucks to be awake in a lot of ways, because you're just like, everyone's shouting numbers all around, and all you've seen is like Grey's Anatomy with this stuff, and that's not a great segue into actually having a surgery. But you and the other surgeons, you were talking to me the whole time, and even like small talk at some points where you were just making sure that I wasn't alone. I remember, not during the surgery, but when I had to get a second lumbar puncture, and I was terrified because my first lumbar puncture went so wrong. You got a nurse in the room just to hold my hand. That was the entire purpose of that nurse, was just to hold my hand to make sure that I was okay during that procedure. And that really set up me for success during this surgery and during like any procedure I've had with you, was the fact that you don't leave people alone, even though you have every right to like just focus on what you're doing. You were there the whole time with me, not just like physically, but like talking to me and making sure that I was okay. And that made me feel a lot better.
Do you remember anything about the post-procedure? Did you have a bad headache afterwards? How was like the next few days? Do you remember?
Yes. So I remember having like a little bit of pain in the stent area, but to be fair, something had just gone into my brain that wasn't in my brain before. So it wasn't really shocking to me that I had a little bit of pain. It did take a couple weeks to have that like soreness kind of go away. And even with the soreness, it was, I would say, even more manageable pain-wise than the actual pseudotumor headache. It was like less pain than that headache, but it was definitely noticeable. I was up and walking again within like a day. I was walking further distances than maybe I should have been within a week. And I also went on like a 2-week college program like a month and a half later after the surgery. So my first college course was at Stony Brook. It was residential, was a 3-credit-hour class shoved into 2 weeks, and it was also oceanography. So we were out on boats collecting specimen. And I was there about a month and a half after the surgery. So if that gives you any indication of how fast my recovery was, I think it's a pretty good indicator.
Very good. Elizabeth, what do you remember from the procedure, or what do you want to forget?
Gosh. I definitely remember the part being awake and just really hoping that I would be a candidate. The entire time, that was the only thing I could focus on, was I really hoped that this would work. And just being, after you confirmed that I was viable for the procedure, it really didn't matter. Like, and you could have said anything to me after that. I was just elated. And then afterwards, it was in December. So I remember, this is going to be so kooky. I remember my family brought in Christmas decorations into my room, trying to cheer me up. And I remember just being delighted and watching all of the Santa Claus movies on TV. It's funny, the things that you remember. I didn't remember being in so much pain. It was just like I had an opportunity to chill out in a hospital room for the first time, just being completely zen and relaxed. And yeah, it's kind of a phenomenal thing to have that kind of super happy feeling, being surrounded by family and not feeling so really phenomenally depressed that my outcome was going to be so negative, the way that like 2 weeks prior to that I thought it was going to be.
No, again, that's something that many patients experience, meaning that there is post-procedure pain, there is, the concern for, hopefully everything went well, hopefully this will work, hopefully nothing bad will happen. But also I think the sense of relief that I see in many patients, that now they can, look forward to improvement of their symptoms and feeling better over time. No question. Allyson, back to you.
very similar stories, which is so great to hear. I remember what you were wearing, believe it or not. Like, I remember it that clear. It was some kind of camouflage pants. And I just remember thinking, like, this doesn't seem like he would be wearing those type of pants, but it was super cool. So that was during the surgery and the awake part. And similar to what everyone was saying, like, I remember literally praying, like, just tell me it's going to work. Just tell me it's going to work. And then, like, give me the good stuff to put me to sleep. But I also remember you, as others were just talking about, like, talking to me the entire time. We were talking about the Kardashians, which I also remember thinking, like, he does not give a crap about these girls. But you were asking me which one was my favorite, and we talked all about that. I remember literally our entire conversation. Then I got the good stuff and dreamt about great things. And when you guys put me to sleep, and then I had an experience where I woke up and the pulsating was gone. Like, I could actually hear again. My vision actually came back perfect, like, right away. Like, Dr. Dinkin was also my ophthalmologist at the time, neuro-ophthalmologist. And, like, I didn't have any vision problems. I did wake up. I remember just, like, feeling like this is a miracle. Like, I didn't have any pain. And then I was studying for my master's degree. And within that week, I was back in classes with a baby, taking classes for my master's program, and never felt better. That was it. Yeah, that was my story. It was like instant. People don't believe it, but it was literally waking up and then also being hungry because I hadn't eaten for, like, 48 hours, because I was having 2 different surgeries. So, yeah.
Well, as a disclaimer, I never watched the show Kardashians. I probably
You
just like to be clear.
You made me believe. Do you have camouflage surgery pants? Because that's what I do.
It's more like the, what you call the lead suit that we wear, like from X-ray. Yeah. But that's correct. Yeah. But usually, often as patients about the movies, the TV show, something we can keep talking through this, because I think it relaxes the patients and I think it makes our work easier also. So yeah, there's one of the few things we talk about is movies or TV shows. You brought up a good point. Like, actually, I was going to ask you. I think you called us a few days later. You went home and said that everything was good, and then I think it was Christmas. I mean, New Year's Eve, maybe, or New Year's Day. You call, like, "Oh, my headaches are back. What's going on?" And I got a frantic message from our answering service, and I think we talked, and you had, like, tell us, what do you remember? I remember this very well, but I'll see what you remember.
I remember being so scared to death that, like, it was the end. Like, I was like, oh my God, I have a headache. Like, I remember telling you my hands were blue, and like, you were like, what? Do you have blue hands? And I was like taking pictures and sending you pictures. Long story short, it ended up being my jeans that I was, like, rubbing on. They were brand new jeans I got for Christmas. And I was like, Dr. Patsalides, like, I'm broken. My hands are turning blue and I have headaches. And it was all to be expected. Like, I was on steroids at the time, and, like, it wasn't at all the headaches that I had before it, but, like, we drove back into New York City. I would, like, look, I have blue hands. And, like, then I came home, and then I guess I wore those jeans again. And then I was like, oh my God, my hands are blue again. I was a little bit of a hypochondriac, I think, right coming out, like, the first couple months. I was definitely, like, in my own head, for lack of a better term, and thinking that, like, all these other things I'm feeling are because something's wrong with my stent. Nothing was ever wrong. Everything was perfect. And it wasn't until, like, I went back and had my lumbar puncture, which are probably the worst part of everything, if I'm being really honest. So then I went back and had my lumbar puncture, and my pressure was good. And I had all those crazy vision tests that Dr. Dinkin made me do, and everything was perfect. And that was 3 months post surgery. And then I was able to kind of, like, ease my pain and, like, feel like, okay, I am okay. Like, everything is fine. So yeah, that's what I remember. I don't know if you remember me being crazier, but
I never said crazy or hypochondriac, but many patients, I remember the blue fingers, and probably like an extra drink on New Year's Eve, maybe.
Yes, yeah. You had said I could drink, to be fair. Yeah. You were like, maybe it's the medicine mixing with the wine. And I'm like, maybe he's right. But yeah.
But this is something that many patients go through. Like they feel well, then a week later, a month later, that could be like a headache that is often unrelated, or it could be like, like blurry vision momentarily, which could be like an ocular migraine or dry eyes, we have to check everything. But this is something that actually many patients, I think especially patients who are like vision problems or debilitating pulsatile tinnitus, and things got much better, and then suddenly they think like, oh, I heard pulsatile tinnitus for like 5 seconds. And I said, so they get very worried that things are coming back or things are undone, which is not really easy to do. So I share many patients have this concern, and we have to address it. And I just remember, you very well from a few days after the procedure.
And I remember even saying to you, like, oh my gosh, I could feel my stent. I'm like laying on it. And you're like, there's no way that your skull is in the way. And I was like, what if I push too hard? So yeah, I was obviously very concerned about everything.
Oh, very concerned because it's natural to some extent, because you're going through a disease that is rare. Many doctors have not picked it up. You are going through a new treatment. At the time, it was very, very new. Right, so there's not really much experience about it. You cannot ask other patients. You cannot ask other doctors. There is no, experience of hundreds or thousands of patients to tell you, look, this can happen in 1% or 5% or 10%. This was all new, and so I think it's actually perfectly normal that there is some, anxiety or some stress behind this. That, is this normal? Is not normal? Is this to be expected? And honestly, I didn't even know myself what is to be expected, and what is normal recovery versus recurrent symptoms. And Dr. Dinkin and we brought many patients back at the time that we wouldn't do today, because now we know that a lot of these things are transient and expected and unrelated to having high pressure again or any problem with the stent. So. But that's, we went through these motions together of understanding it's not just the procedure. The procedure is, I often say, is relatively the easy part, because most of what's going on during the procedure, we control it. You have a plan, what you're going to do. We use device A, device B, it's kind of like one step after the other. So I would say almost always we have a plan that we execute, and very rarely have to do a plan B or plan C. But what we don't control is how patients feel and how the treatment works sometimes. So we have to, so again, I think what we learned from patients like you and you, all 3 of you, and all the other patients that were treated in the first years of this treatment actually has helped us tremendously to take better care of patients today. And that I cannot say this enough, I think the last part of this discussion, I think, which is, what made me think of you, is how is life after all these years? You almost 10 years, Elizabeth almost 9 years, Cali 7 years or so, 6 or 7 years. Quality of life, limitations in daily activities, anything that you wish was different, anything that made you question the decision? How did your life evolve after that? I don't know who can go first, Allyson or.
Sure, I'll go first. I have a quote that everyone makes fun of me for, and they literally just posted it yesterday on my social media, that you're truly living your best life. Because ever since that December 19th, 2013, my life has changed for the better. I have no limitations. I work full time. I'm in marketing at Amazon. So I have a full-time job. I go back and forth to the city. I have my daughter, my youngest child is 14, so she definitely keeps me busy and on my toes. And yeah, I have no regrets. The best thing that happened, I think, was when Kelly, I think, had reached out, because I don't feel that there's enough that I could say or tell people. Like I've shared this with Kelly, but we did a YouTube video after like my first year. I kid you not, I get hit up at least once a week from patients that are struggling with pseudotumor cerebri. And everyone, I talk to them on the phone all the time, and like everyone laughs about it. Like I literally was on the phone with a guy last night, and like, but it's my way of kind of paying it forward because I know what I went through and how scared I was, and people don't believe it. Like someone called me last week, like, are you sure you were allowed to work out? Are you sure you were allowed to do all these things? And I'm like, I promise you, like, I'm not. I have no reason to lie. I also have no reason to be talking to you at 11 o'clock at night. But yeah, so it's my only regret out of all of it is that I wish we could do more of this, because I do feel like there are so many people that are struggling and scared. And I wish they had the opportunity to kind of learn. And I think these things will also do that. But yeah, I know Cali mentioned the Facebook groups. Some people are really saying crazy things that just aren't true. And it's giving people hope is what I like have learned and want to give back from this procedure. So my life is amazing. I've been to 7 concerts this year. I still watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians. It's my guilty pleasure. And yeah, so that's my life. And I am so honored and thankful to be here and kind of be reunited with the people that changed my life.
Thank you. That was very nicely said. Elizabeth?
It's so funny. I think that each of the people that you've touched through this experience, as I said before, you saved my life, and you'll probably hear that resonated. That's the theme. With this, since my procedure 9 years ago, my career has really taken off, largely because I'm able to be present. You know, like when you're debilitated with headaches, it's hard to be someone that sits and is able to focus all the time. And with this, I am able to be present. I like Allyson said, I don't have any limitations. If I wanted to do anything, I'm literally able to put my mind to it, and I don't have any limitations. So now, just recently, I took a job where I am the COO of an organization. It's the Research Foundation for the City University. And so I'm part of that executive team, which is wonderful. I have an amazing family. I have a 4-year-old daughter who keeps me on my toes all of the time, and an awesome husband and extended family. And we live in the city, which is also something that's going to be keeping me on my toes too. And with that, like Allyson was saying, and I'm going to echo that, these are the things that if I had a magic wand, this is what I would change. I would make the surgery something that would have been available sooner. The years of pain that I experienced, if I could have had that sooner, I would have made that earlier, but you can't change the past. And I would make this something that's more readily available outside of major cities. And I am incredibly fortunate that I live in New York City. But when you look on those horrible Facebook groups, if you live in a rural community in the middle of the country, chances are either they don't know that this exists, or if they do know it exists, it's hours away that they would find any major metropolitan that could even think about offering this. Number 3, have better education. Like I mentioned early on, the neurologist that I saw had this on a potential list of things that she would say that I had, but because it's rare, it was certainly not high on the list of things that were potentially considered for me. And number 4, get rid of those horrible Facebook groups. They're a huge downer, and they just share that misinformation and give people more to despair about There's no hope in any of them. I think that the thing that they do is scare people, and yeah, that's not anything that I would want to give to anybody else. And number 5 would be do more things like this. This is a highlight and a way to offer hope to other individuals. Because there is a life after. There is a treatment. It's not a treatment for every single person, but for the people that are viable candidates, it's an amazing treatment opportunity, and one where you see 3 women here that have had this procedure and are thriving after. And so those are the 5 things I would change.
Can I just chime in? I want number 6 to be to find a new procedure for spinal taps, Dr. Patsalides.
Oh, gosh.
You could
Amen.
please do a new clinical trial on that. That would be game changing.
Actually, there is a lot of work being done. In how to substitute a spinal tap with other means of measurement, whether it's like non-invasive measurements or it's kind of like an MRI scan type. So hopefully in the next 5-6 years we have something along those lines. Cali, we haven't heard from you from a while, so tell us how life has been after stents, any limitations, anything that you wish was different.
Well, so one thing that is like a little bit different for me than it has been for most of your patients is that I was 17, so my life hadn't started. I was a high school student. And then when I was diagnosed, it was kind of like, well, there goes all my hopes and dreams. Goodbye. And so after the surgery, like moments after the surgery, my life was opened up again, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was walking around the neuro ICU, and I passed by the biomedical engineering research room. And that was kind of the moment where like things clicked for me, and I knew I wanted to be an engineer so that I could make advancements that helped everyday people. And so I went to school in Ohio. I grew up, born and raised in New York City. I went to school in Ohio, in Columbus at Ohio State, a Big Ten school. And I spent my college years studying. I started as biomedical engineering and then realized I don't like bio. So I switched to electrical engineering. And I went to Big Ten football games, which was absolutely unheard of. If you've ever seen a Big Ten football games, they are the loudest things on the planet. And they are so overwhelming. And it's something that I never in my life pictured that I could do once, not like even regularly, which I was doing that weekend after weekend. I went to concerts. I graduated about a year and a half ago now. So I now am like a practicing engineer. I work at one of the largest engineering firms in the country as a power systems engineer. And I also just led a massive engineering effort out in New Jersey to helpfully get people some more reliable power. And that was about 2 years ahead of when any young engineer usually leads a project. I was leading this project. So I've accomplished quite a bit that I didn't think would ever be possible. I mean, I mentioned before, when I was diagnosed, I didn't think that I would make it to 19. I couldn't picture my life past 19. And now, like, I made a promise to myself since the surgery that I would go travel and see at least one beautiful thing every single year. And I've done that. And I'm planning my trip for next year. And it's been all about just taking every opportunity that doctors told me was simply impossible and flipping it on their head and being able to do that. So that's been my post-surgery life. I'm really happy about it, and I'm very thankful for it. Like as everyone said already, Dr. Patsalides very much saved my life. As for like post-surgery limitations, I have not had any limitations. I went caving about like a year and a half after the surgery. I have hiked. I'm now training for my first race. I'm hoping one day to be able to run the Run for Rare, the half marathon, to raise awareness for pseudotumor cerebri. And yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing to get an engineering degree in the first place, but it's certainly not an easy one when the first year or two, you have the anxiety in the back of your head that this is all kind of borrowed time. But I think one of the things I'm proudest of like overcoming was like just realizing that this isn't borrowed time. That's, I think, the biggest difference between your first couple years out of the surgery and now moving on to like the rest of your life is that when you first get the surgery, it's kind of like, okay, like I still have this mindset of what if it comes back? I have this anxiety. But as you like move on in life, you realize like, this isn't borrowed. This is just time I have now. This is just how it's going to be forever. I don't need to think about things in the survivalist mentality anymore. I just have time. So I think the last part was regrets or like things that I would change. Kind of the same things that have already been said. I wouldn't change anything about the surgery. I was also very lucky that I only was symptomatic for about a year before the surgery. But I think the only things that I would change are like awareness, especially for younger patients. I almost didn't get the diagnosis of pseudotumor cerebri because of my age. Doctors told me that like almost like they were doing me a favor of like, you wouldn't really qualify to be diagnosed with this disease, but like you meet every other criteria except for age. So I guess we'll throw you a bone and give you the diagnosis. So I think that advocacy and like just awareness in general are the only things that I would change. And again, like I wish that this was available everywhere. I wish this was something that was taught in day one of every residency program for every doctor. And I wish that this was something that became so like known about that it was just not special at all. That would be my dream, you know?
Well, these are good. First of all, thanks for sharing your thoughts and your experience. And I think for you, I always feel like a special connection with every child or every kid I've treated, because it's a difficult decision for everybody, for the doctors, for their families, for the patients themselves, and I think there's always a special bond. And I was always proud to see you advancing through college and doing well. So that makes me very happy that what you have accomplished. I also think all of you brought a good point, like the awareness and how we can provide good information to patients. I think there's like two risks today. One is that, similar to 10, 15 years ago, that there is not enough knowledge about this and there's not enough awareness about, IIH versus having high intracranial pressure without necessarily meeting the criteria for IIH. There's a lot of patients like that. But they also suffer and they also deserve treatment. And then there is the risk of, which I see this more often, the risk of overtreating. Now, it's not every patient who has a headache and it's a 20, 25-year-old woman needs to have a stent, right? In fact, that's going to be, or every patient who has Pulsatile Tinnitus should have a stent, because that's actually, it's going to be like doing the equivalent of doing spine surgery on everybody who has like back pain. I think we understand that that's not going to work, right? You have to have, criteria. We need to have a good understanding as a medical community what we are doing, to the patient in terms of offering a treatment that is destined to help. That's not so much for patients to, this is not so much a patient's responsibility. I think this is a medical community responsibility. But I think patients like you, I think they can offer a lot in awareness. And maybe we can think about this a little bit. And you are all accomplished professionals. Maybe we can think about a foundation for patients awareness, like something that we can provide information to patients. That's something that we might have to think about. I don't see many questions in the from the audience, even though it's like, I think.
No, I think they're mostly, I think we're going to try and keep it pretty general and not
Yeah.
specific to each individual's
Correct.
medical questions. And maybe you can answer this one. This is for you. All the beautiful ladies are so young. What is the oldest patient you have successfully stented?
That's a good question, actually. I would say the youngest was 2 years old. The oldest was early 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact age, but I would say, let's say 70, around 70. Since there's no other questions, do you have any last comments? And maybe some questions will pop up in the meantime.
I can ask a common question that I get. I know Elizabeth and Allyson have kids. Did you have kids after stenting? I know that's a very common question I get because it's mostly young women and they're very concerned that if they get a stent, are they going to be able to have kids? And what does that mean for pregnancy and childbirth and all those things?
Good question.
Yeah, so if anyone was paying close attention to the math, my stent was 9 years ago, or almost 9 years ago, and my daughter is 4. And so I had my daughter several years after my procedure, and I'm happy to share all of this information. She was born via C-section, largely because, much like her dad and me, she has a big old head. And so that was the recommended way to go. I mentioned that because that was another surgery. And so when I say I have no limitations, I'm not at a risk for having additional surgeries, but she was planned to be not a C-section and planned to just be a natural birth. And so I also wasn't intending to have any limitations there either. So if you are a person that is viable for the stent surgery and are interested in having kids, that wasn't a risk or a limitation for me. And if that's part of your life plan, shouldn't be a risk or a limitation either.
No, I'm glad you shared this, and I will add that there should be no limitation in terms of, there should be a normal pregnancy management, and whether it's like normal delivery or C-section, that's really unrelated to having stenting procedure or IIH. This should all be purely like an OB related decision. Yeah.
I think a lot of the questions, I think this is going to be we're going to plan to put us on YouTube afterwards. A lot of patients.
Yes, I think we'll
show other people.
We'll take out the part about Kardashians and put it on YouTube. I see a lot of questions that are like a little, patient specific. I have an email that I typically respond to patients. It may take a few days, but I do. So you can ask me these questions, outside this forum. And I think I wait for patients to have. That's a good question.
No, there's one or two more.
Okay.
I know we talked a little bit about lumbar punctures, and back then everybody after stenting had a lumbar puncture as part of the study, but that's not.
Right. There's two reasons for that. One was we want to prove that what they did worked, and worked in terms of vision. That required a lot of neuro-ophthalmology workup evaluation after the procedure. Obviously, the symptoms that are subjective, like pulsatile tinnitus, headaches, that we relied on patients reporting about this. And then we also want to show that we normalize the intracranial pressure. And that was the purpose of doing a spinal tap a few months after stenting, but also that, how can I say this? As a part of the clinical trial, the FDA mandated in the beginning. So the first, many patients were getting also a lumbar puncture because it was part of the design of the clinical trial and mandated by the FDA. Today, I think we rarely do a spinal tap after stenting, at least in my patient population, unless we're trying to troubleshoot persistent symptoms, or we are not sure that the pressure has normalized. I think that's pretty rare. I saw a question that while you're scrolling, do the stents ever need to be replaced? I think the answer is a little complex. The actual stent cannot be replaced. You cannot remove the stent and put another stent, or remove a stent and not have a stent in your head. This is not like a shunt where a shunt can be removed. So the stent is permanent. There is a small risk of needing additional procedures. In other words, new narrowing developing in adjacent to the stent, or upstream in the venous flow from the stent. That risk, or that likelihood, is low, not too low. It's about 10%, 11% within the next few years. So there is a possibility of needing repeat stenting for like new stenosis, but not to actually replace the stent that's already in the head.
A lot of the other ones are very like procedure specific, dangers of the procedure, what are basic things that are considered, but in the future, you plan on doing some webinars about that?
Yeah, I think we have to, we restart. It's just, I try to have one of these every month, and we end up doing like 2 or 3 a year. So I'll try to be a little more on top of this. It's just running out of time all the time. But I think that I have one coming soon about revisiting the indications to have venous stenting, the risks of stenting, and I think another one specifically about headaches before and after venous stenting, which is another common problem that I think we need to discuss a little more. So, but these are unrelated to today's roundtable about our patients. Any last comments? I think we've been talking for over an hour now, which is exceeded, I thought we'll be kind of like 30, 45 minutes here. So I'm glad we're discussing for over an hour and we don't feel tired. I will let you say, your last comments. So Elizabeth, we go first. Yeah.
Yeah. I think to sum it up, this has been a delightful time to recap. Yeah, it's almost been 10 years, but yeah, again, saved my life. Anytime that you need something, it would just be an opportunity to pay it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Allyson?
Yeah, so I would again echo everything that my fellow patients have mentioned. It has been a life changer. I am excited to be continuing to spread the message. People are welcome to, they do anyway, and I love it. I meet so many new friends from around the globe. Welcome to reach out to me at any time. And as I can get back to all of you, I will. And thank you so much for having me. I want to come visit for my 10th anniversary and take new pictures. And then we can talk more about, I like the idea of continuing to help spread the message because of all the myths that are out there. So yeah, that's all. Thank you guys. It was so great seeing you after all this time.
Oh, thank you very much for participating. Cali.
Same thing that has already been said. Anytime you want someone to help out with anything, advocating or just information on the surgery in general, I'm always here, always happy to do that. I think one last thing that I think is worth mentioning, that a lot of people are also probably nervous about, like after the surgery and just like follow-up care. And as someone who was also a hypochondriac after the surgery, of anything that could have been a headache was everything coming back. Dr. Patsalides put up with every single one of those phone calls and emails, and every single one that I needed to be brought in so that he could tell me face to face that I was okay. He did. And never once did I feel like this relationship was over and that I was just on my own dealing with the aftermath of the surgery. Every single time I felt like he's been there the whole time helping me through this, and never once has I felt like this trial is now over and this is just like a period of my life that, I was, dropped off and now I just have to go find a new check-in doctor or whatever. One time I messaged him and I was like, my knee hurts. What do I do? So he put up with me. He never once abandoned me throughout this whole journey. It's now been almost 7 years. And I think that is also a very beautiful thing he's a very busy doctor and he will always make the time to make sure that things are going well. And that is something I've also been like extremely appreciative of. So like, thank you in general for that as well. And if anyone is nervous about that moving forward of just fear of at one point being on your own, you're not. He's there and his staff is always there. And that's something that has also helped me like through my recovery and onward. And for the rest of my life, that will be something that I'm extremely grateful for. So, yeah.
I would say to you, and it's very appropriate in both hospitals where I worked, I think that I was surrounded by excellent staff, from the nurses in the procedure rooms, the techs, Kelly, like as a nurse practitioner, secretaries who answered the phone. And that makes, that's important because, patient care is not just a procedure, as you said, it's everything that comes before and after also. So thanks for acknowledging that. I will thank you again for participating in the clinical trial like many years ago and for sharing your experience again. I think this is very helpful for other patients and also for the medical community. And it was a pleasure seeing you again. I'll enjoy the holidays. Have a good Thanksgiving and Christmas when you celebrate. Happy New Year. And I hope we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much. It was nice meeting you all too. Take care.
Thank you.
Nice
Bye.
Thank you.
Cool, everybody. Bye-bye.